Hello everyone and welcome to my first impressions video of the F-100D Super Sabre, affectionately known as the Hun in DCS World. This is a brand new module by Granelli Designs, their very first module. I was on the fence for a little bit but decided to pick this one up. This isn't going to be a full review, I'll certainly do a full review in the future, but for now I've just had about a week playing around with this. And so I just want to give my first impressions for anyone else who's on the fence of whether or not to pull the trigger on this one or not. Anyway, let's jump in. Now, honestly, the first thing that struck me about this module is the sound effects. Which, yeah, is something that I'm noticing that DCS is really improving on recently, getting more and more really top-end sound editing. Especially here, it's the engine sounds that I love about this thing. You can really hear every little change there in the engine. It's super responsive. It gives really good feedback, so it's not just kind of decoration there. You know what state the engine's in by how it sounds. The gun sounds also are nice and punchy. Very satisfying to use those. And externally as well, it sounds very nice. You can really hear the roar of that afterburner. Now, in terms of the visuals, really can't complain about the resolution on the cockpit graphics. It has some outstanding levels of detail here. Looking around, every surface has really high resolution on pretty much everything. A lot of the pieces are fully 3D modelled. All of these bolts here are actual 3D pieces. A huge amount of work has gone into reproducing this. My one complaint, and this is a personal thing, is I would have preferred if this was a little less weathered, especially if we look around at things like the headrest. I mean, absolutely, that is beautiful detail, really immersive detail, but that also makes this very much look like a museum piece rather than an active combat aircraft. Same is especially true with the cockpit canopy, which is filthy. Desperately needs a good polish there. And yes, nice in terms of the detail, in terms of the immersion there, but again, it could do with a bit of a polish. It looks more like this has been sitting in a museum hangar for a while, and not something that is getting ready for frontline combat. And this is also a bit of an issue in combat. All of these little dirt specks make spotting enemy planes actually quite difficult. Also worth bringing up is the fact that front visibility on this thing is frankly awful. The center pylons there really get in the way, especially when you're trying to pull enemies into the HUD. Your actual HUD glass is tiny, and you've got all of this metal in front of you. You've got glorious views behind you and around you, but as for things actually on your nose, very easy to lose sight of them. Externally, though, the level of detail, again, really can see the effort that they've put into this. Very high resolution on all of these textures here. Very good lighting and reflection effects off of the surface. and we have a whole load of liveries to choose from right from launch. The animations are wonderfully smooth, well rendered there. Everything coming out really nice. There's even a little bit of wiggle and jiggle there with the kind of inertia of the gear locking into place and vibrating back and forth. A lot of detail that they've added there. As I said, a nice selection of liveries that are available right from the get-go here, and a lot of that is a lot of variation there. These aren't just all just changes on the same theme. We've got some of these very drab, worn-looking Vietnam-era liveries, looking like a nice active combatant aircraft. We have some of the polished metal aircraft if you prefer that kind of look, and some absolutely beautiful air display liveries here, especially this Sky Blazer one looks absolutely top-notch there. And of course we can't leave out the absolutely beautiful Catfish livery here. Seen this a lot on multiplayer servers. It looks awesome. It's perfectly fitting for this aircraft. In terms of what you get right from early access, there's actually a reasonable amount of single-player content. We've got a suite of different training missions, and these are really quite good, giving you the basics of both sort of general aircraft operation and what you need to get into the air and get various weapons off, which is quite nice because some of the weapon employment is a little bit tricky with exactly the order of commands. I really like using the in-game tutorials to learn aircraft, and so I've really enjoyed these. They certainly don't cover everything you need to know, but they give you a really good start on getting you enough to get in this aircraft and get it flying in some actual missions. As for missions that are inbuilt here, we've got a few scattered around. They're very selective over which maps they've put these on. We've got maps on the Caucasus, Marianas, and Syria, generally featuring, you know, your normal cold start, takeoff, free flight. They do have dogfights. As far as I've managed to tell, all of the dogfights are dogfights versus farmers, which is a pretty interesting matchup. I've enjoyed practicing with those, but, you know, there could be a little more there. There isn't a huge amount of air-to-ground, but there are some testing missions you can do, add a nice air-to-air refueling, which is a good challenge. Now, there are no full missions, there is only those instant action ones, and not surprising for early access, there are no campaigns right now. So, as normal with a very early access aircraft, mostly you're going to be making your own fun in this thing. Now, as for how I've found this thing, taking it out on multiplayer servers and generally just messing around a bit in single player, do bear in mind I've only had this for a week, this is just my initial impressions, but honestly the way that I would put this is kind of somewhere between the Sabre and the F-4 Phantom is where this really feels. A lot of the systems, instruments, feel a lot like the F4. You've got a lot of dials, a lot of switches that you need to do. Ergonomics is a little bit questionable, so you need to get used to where things are, particularly like the gun selector switch is in the most awkward place. So certainly not as easy to fly as the Sabre. Definitely one of the more complicated modules in terms of weapon employment for its era. It's really quite involved and convoluted. Lots of switches you need to do, lots of systems need to be put in the right area, lots there that is easy to make a mistake in. But on the other hand, that makes this really quite an interesting one. I do like these modules that you do have to put effort into learning. They do take time to get up to speed, but I find them very rewarding when you do learn a new technique. I've particularly had a blast trying to get the Shrikes to work nicely, and they're really fun. And on the topic, the Shrikes are probably the one outstanding feature of this, is that this is perhaps the nicest set of Shrikes that we've got in DCS. Pity that you only get 2 of them, so you don't get the 4 like the A4 mod or the F4, but a really nice feature is the little radar alignment display, the homing display that's normally just for lining up on airfields. That also ties in with the seeker head to point out where the Shrike is getting its signal from, which is really, really nice. It is very difficult in a lot of modules with Shrikes to tell exactly where they are. You're kind of judging based on that audio. Here you've got something you can just line up, and it's really, really useful. Otherwise, in terms of its capabilities, yeah, it's like halfway between the Sabre and the F4. It doesn't have the ordnance levels of the F4, not surprisingly, but it can carry a respectable amount. One major thing to bear in mind with this is the center pylons are kind of your major pylons. Those are the only ones you can take the sidewinders on. Very nicely, you do get a pair of sidewinders on each. You can take 4 sidewinders, which is pretty damn good for this era of aircraft. But those are also the stations that you can only fit the Shrikes onto. They're also the stations you can fit your multiple bomb racks on, and so you really have to choose exactly what you're doing on a mission. It's hard to be a very generalized mission. In terms of its air-to-air capabilities, I've found it reasonable. I've not had luck on multiplayer servers. The only time that I really got into proper dogfights really was when I was learning this, and I did not do well. You can see my previous stream if you want to watch me being a bit embarrassing there and forgetting that I need to turn on the afterburner. But it can definitely hold its own. Not as manoeuvrable as a Sabre, but maybe a bit more forgiving than something like a Phantom, but doesn't have the thruster weight of the Phantom, or at least not the raw thrust of the Phantom. The engines feel a little bit anemic at times. The guns, though, really punchy. Very much a fan of the guns there. They fire off with incredible tight burst, very, very high rate of fire, and they smash enemies out the sky. I've enjoyed using them a lot, both in air-to-air and air-to-ground. The guns are a real star on this thing. Now, the last thing I want to mention, and the last thing that really struck me about this, is its engine is, let's say, temperamental. Or in other words, it's a right bastard that just does not want to be on. You can stall this engine in multiple ways. If you move the throttle too much, the engine begins to backfire, choke, and will eventually stall. If you pull negative G too much, it will stall. If you pull any negative G with the afterburner on, it will stall. Now, it's not the end of the world. Restarting the engine is really quite easy. There's a switch, just flip open the cover, put it into air start mode, pull the throttle back, hear the engine spool up, boom, you're back in the fight. No real loss there. But as someone told me when I was binding controls, perhaps the most important control to bind is that engine restart button, because definitely when you're learning this, you're going to be needing it a lot. So yeah, I don't want to really give a full verdict on this right now, because as I said, I've only had a week with it. That's not enough to get a full impression of a DCS module, especially one that really kind of is different. I have enjoyed my time with this so far. It is a little odd in its era in terms of where you're going to be facing it in multiplayer, because it's kind of old for even a lot of the Cold War settings. It does struggle there. This isn't going to be your dominant plane unless you're in a particularly a era that is very, very early Cold War. And also, it isn't a quick and easy module. There are all sorts of weird quirks and things to learn, so if you're after something nice and quick and simple, there are definitely others to look into. But if you do want a challenge, then yeah, I've enjoyed learning this. I definitely will be putting a lot more time into this going forward, and you can expect a full review once I've kind of properly gathered my thoughts in the future. If you would like to see any full reviews, I have a small playlist that I am slowly building up that will be linked at the end here. And if you want to see me absolutely butchering this thing, then feel free to look over at my live stream that I did on the day this came out, where I didn't do too great, but had a lot of fun. there any particular modules you'd like me to review, please do leave them down below. And if you found this video useful, please do consider like and subscribe. It really does help the channel. And as always, until next time, remember to be kind to yourselves and everyone else. Cheers.